Here in the United States, there's about 22 million Americans who live in either a mobile home or a manufactured home. And this was a couple of decades ago, so it's even more relevant today than now. So a manufactured home built to these modern standards is going to have the same kind of life expectancy as conventional homes. The federal government hires experts, they come into the factories, they're inspecting those homes. Even though it's less expensive, you're not sacrificing consumer protection. Actually, you're getting more than most site-built houses.
My name is Michael Podolsky. I'm one of the co-founders at Best Consumer. And we've been in business for the past 13 years. We get a lot of interest from our viewers and visitors to our site and our posters about manufactured home as an industry. And Tony Kovach, that I've met, is a specialist in the area. I'll let Tony speak to that and explain his credentials on that effect. And we chosen to create a series of videos that will talk about home construction, specifically manufactured homes, and how it differentiates with other housing possibilities for today's consumer.
Michael, thanks for inviting me to do the interview. I've been in the manufactured home industry for over 25 years. Years before some of the mainstream media reports that millionaires and a couple of billionaires lived in manufactured homes, I've personally owned and lived in manufactured homes as well as one mobile home. And I've lived in conventional housing, anything from, tiny house-sized studios to regular apartments, conventional construction in nice neighborhoods, brand new homes and what have you. So I can say from firsthand experience that you cook, clean, eat, live and love the same in a manufactured home as you would in other types of conventionally built housing. Our videos and our articles have been cited by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, National Association of Realtors, university-level research, mainstream news reports, the Congressional Record. So as Al Cole, a senior vice president at Oxford Bank, said, I've worked with factories, associations, finance companies, communities, and retail, the whole gamut really of the industry. So we have friends and foes like any other professional, but the reason we have the kind of engagement that we do is people find us credible, and therefore, they're happy to come and visit us several million times a year.
What is manufactured home? Tell us, please.
A great question. A manufactured home is a form of factory-built housing. So think about it. Your cell, your car, your clothing, transportation appliances, many of the things we as consumers buy and use, they all come up from a factory or a production center. In Japan or Europe or other nations, factory-built housing is actually increasing in the marketplace. Here in the United States, there's about 22 million Americans who live in either a mobile home or a manufactured home. And so manufactured homes are the most popular type of factory-built housing in terms of the numbers of homes being purchased.
What is the difference? Is there a difference between manufactured home, regular home, and mobile home that you can point to a consumer?
That's a good question. Let me start first with the difference between manufactured homes and mobile homes, then we'll get to the difference between manufactured homes and conventional housing. So first of all, there is a difference between a mobile home and a manufactured home. It's not just marketing or industry lingo. There's reasons for the terminology. So a little history is helpful. If you go back in time, trailer houses emerged from the RV industry in the 1930s. By the 1950s, mobile homes emerged. So they were bigger, heavier. You had to have specialized equipment to move them. By the 1970s, you started getting into the manufactured housing era. So if you have something that's built on or after June 15th of 1976, and it has a red seal like we're going to show you, that's going to be a HUD code manufactured home. And those homes are also going to have this data plate. And what that means is the home is specifically certified, Michael, to meet certain snow loads, wind zone, insulation, and other construction standards. And you won't find that data plate or that red label on the back of a mobile home. Most people today, when they think of a conventional house, they think of a home built on a slab foundation because that's how most new houses are built. But if you go back in time, Michael, Homes built 40, 50, 60 years ago, for example, a lot of those were built over a crawl space. So that's what you're going to see with a manufactured home. You can have one that's what they call ground set that costs a little bit more money. But typically what you have is one that you take 2 or 3 steps up, get on the porch, and then you walk into the home. And those are going to have some foundation enclosures or what some people call skirting. But basically it'll be vinyl or brick or some other kind of material like a hardy board, that kind of thing. So it's just good to know that, there's been millions and millions of conventional houses that have been built like that over a crawl space. And that's how the manufactured homes are going to be built. And now to get to the technical difference between a manufactured home and a conventional house, a manufactured home has to be built to this federal building code that we were talking about. And that in a conventional built house, that's going to be built to a local or state building code. So we've got a quote here from Steve Duke, an attorney for the Louisiana Manufactured Housing Association. And he said this, and it makes perfect sense. The terminology matters because the terminology determines the construction standards that a home is built to. So a manufactured home is built to what they call a performance code. And that's been established by the federal government for consumer safety, energy savings, durability, factors like that. A conventional house is routinely built to what they call prescriptive building standards. So that's how many nails, how many screws, what weight shingles, so on and so forth. So with a manufactured home, it has to perform the same as a conventional house, but technically it doesn't have to have the same kind of materials. Usually it does. But someday they may come up with an innovation that doesn't use the same kind of stud as a conventional house, for instance. So Mark Weiss, the president of the Manufactured Housing Association of Regulatory Reform, he describes it this way. A HUD code manufactured home is affordable housing built in a controlled environment to a federal performance-based construction standards. That means in a practical sense that the federal standards are designed so that a manufactured home meets the highest quality, safety, and durability standards.
Do manufactured homes last long? What is the life expectancy of manufactured home if it is to be compared to the conventional housing?
That's an important question. And actually what you're going to see, if you dig into some of the research, there's been studies done by Harvard University and Iowa State University, and they looked at these specific questions, Michael. And what those guys did is determine that, and this was a couple of decades ago, so it's even more relevant today than now. A manufactured home built to these modern standards is going to have the same kind of life expectancy as conventional homes. The one thing I like to tell consumers, though, Michael, is this. It's important on any kind of housing, whether it's conventional or manufactured, you want to make sure that you're doing your proper maintenance. If you're doing the proper maintenance, then the life expectancy is going to be very comparable.
What about costs? So what about manufactured homes? Shall I expect the cost savings to be passed on to the consumer? And that's why it would be important for consumers to take a look at the pricing and the availability of manufactured homes.
That's really a good tee up, Michael. Let me give you a couple of points to answer your question and dig a little bit deeper on what we talked about before. First of all, you're right. Typically, a manufactured home, apples to apples. So if you have the same kind of features in a conventional house or a manufactured house, typical savings is going to be about a third to a half over conventional housing. You're also going to have a greener home. And what I mean by that, the construction process has less wasted materials. That's one of the reasons why the cost is less. Another reason why the cost is less is frankly labor cost. When you can do something inside of a factory, you don't have the interruptions caused by weather. All the building materials can be scheduled to be there and so on. So what you end up with is a home that's got two kinds of supervision. So besides the factory supervisors, the factory inspection, with a HUD code manufactured home, you also have third-party inspectors that they're required to come into the plant and make sure that those homes are being built to those federal standards. So this isn't like an honor system The federal government hires experts. They come into the factories. They're inspecting those homes. Another thing that's interesting, even though you're getting a house for less, for the reasons we talked about, the updated standards that were put into effect in the year after the year 2000, there was a dispute resolution process that was established for consumers. So one, if let's say that you have a warranty issue, and of course any new home's got a warranty, the warranty will vary depending on what part of the home you're talking about, but it's generally going to be from 1 year to several years depending on what feature you're looking at. Now, so besides the warranty, the installation is also covered. So if you, for any reason, a consumer had a problem, let's say the retailer didn't have a good subcontractor do the installation, I'm just picking an example, then if you don't get satisfaction from the retailer or the installer, HUD has this dispute resolution process. And basically what that means is this, that you can contact that HUD dispute resolution process, and they will step in and they will make sure that a third party comes in, they'll look the situation over, and they're there to advocate for fairness for the consumer as well as fairness for the installer or the retailer, to make sure that someone's not making an unreasonable demand. So it's a tremendous peace of mind, and to give you an idea as to how, and not to say that these homes are perfect. I never want to give somebody that impression. But according to a federal official that I spoke with, less than 1/4% of all new HUD code manufactured homes ever go to dispute resolution. So that means that 99.75% of manufactured homes aren't handled through dispute resolution. Whatever warranty or things like that come up are typically handled between the retailer, the installer, the factory, and the consumer. So even though it's less expensive, you're not sacrificing consumer protection. Actually, you're getting more than most site-built houses would get.
What is the largest manufactured home as far as square footage is concerned that was ever manufactured in the factory?
That's a fascinating question, and I'd say this. Let me take it from the other side of the question, and then we'll go up. The smallest manufactured home is 320 square feet, give or take. So about the size of a tiny house, a little bit bigger than some of the tiny houses that are out there. So now from that size, in a single section manufactured home, you got single sections, you got multi sections. So with a single section manufactured home, maybe the most common size you see in most parts of the country today are what they call 16 by 80s. That doesn't mean that the house is actually 16 feet wide. It doesn't mean that the house is actually 80 feet long, but that's the shipping size of the home. So a 16 by 80 might be 15 feet 4 inches by 76 feet floor size. So you can do the math, but roughly 1,120 square feet for that size home. So a multi-section home could be 2,400 square feet. But to be very honest, there's some things that some people never think about. You can have literally a second story with some manufactured home. You can have a manufactured home that's built over a partial or full basement in some parts of the country. Now, like for example, here in Florida, you don't have basements under anything. But at different parts of the country where you can have a basement, if you wanted to, you could have a manufactured home built over a basement. So in terms of potential size, it would be very easy to have 3,000 or 4,000 square feet under roof in a HUD code manufactured home, all things considered.
So, being an expert in the industry, given the fact that it is less expensive, less costly, why such a low percentage of homes are manufactured homes? As an expert in the industry, why do you think it's not sufficiently utilized by today's consumer?
Michael, that's maybe one of the best questions that a person can ask. I wasn't expecting you to ask that, and I'd love to do a separate video on that, but let me give you a quick tease for that. Frankly, people in our own industry have done a lousy job of explaining those differences. We on our MH Living News website, we have a resource called the Ultimate Third Party Research. And we've got literally dozens of third-party studies that have been done over the years, and they all demonstrate these facts that we're talking about. If you went to the Manufactured Housing Institute website, another trade association, and you looked at the reports that we have on MH Living News, and then you look to see if that same report would be on the MHI website, unfortunately, a lot of those things just aren't there. So for whatever reason, we could talk about industry politics and things like that another time. But frankly, our industry has not done a good job of communicating that. And so even though I would say that maybe mainstream media has some level of responsibility, but if the industry's not doing a good job, how can you blame the mainstream media very much for it? You know what I mean?
Tony, I would like to conclude this first video. We're gonna, as a second video, we're gonna talk about the process, about buying a manufactured home. That's our next video, and for our viewers, please continue watching this series. Me and Tony are gonna come back together and shoot the second video really soon.